Hello, everyone, and welcome to our podcast. My name is Victoria, and today we will be talking about the protection of our oceans, specifically the ways we can protect the coral reefs. With me today are my fellow classmates Victoria and Isabella. We wanted to talk about this issue because our planet is at risk of a future we cannot turn back from. With global warming being one of the worst issues we face, the environment's not just experiencing global warming, it is also being poisoned by the chemicals in sunscreen and plastic. If we don't make changes now, there's a chance that we might not be able to. During our research, we were introduced to Nova Covington. She is the founder and CEO of the company Goddess Garden, a reef-safe sunscreen company. The mission statement on the website is, "Goddess Garden is for families," and that's precious to them, like the planet, the oceans, the animals, and most of all, each other. Utilizing sustainably sourced materials from the earth that have healed for centuries, Goddess Garden will help the next generations pass by the sea of sameness and give the chemicals the bird. We met with Nova on the 23rd of November over Zoom.
In the beginning of our interview, Nova opens up about her story and how her company came to be.
Goddess Garden, the company that I started about 15 years ago, makes reef safe sunscreen. And we started off with honestly chemical free sunscreen the whole time because we made it for our baby who is really allergic to things. And so once we realized how nasty the chemical sunscreens were, we kind of and in a bottle of chemical sunscreen, there's about 36% of the bottle, which is pure chemicals. And in our research, oxybenzone, one drop of oxybenzone is killing about 6 Olympic-sized swimming pools, like that much water.
According to Jamie Allen, who is an assistant professor of pharmacology at the Michigan State University, oxybenzone is a benzophenone derivative, which is a synthesized chemical. Besides sunscreen, oxybenzone is also found in plastic toys and some flowering plants. Chemicals in oxybenzone in particular are bad for coral reefs for a number of reasons. The chemicals can cause a number of harmful effects, like coral bleaching when ocean temperatures get too high. According to a study done by the U.S. National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, oxybenzone specifically, quote, damages the DNA of corals. Corals with damaged DNA may not be able to reproduce, end quote. If they can't reproduce, then the amount of coral will decline.
So my parents were radical hippies. Quite honestly, I was raised in the wilderness, and it changed me because I can spot a whale before it even pops up in the ocean, I feel like. I just grew up in the wilderness where the tiniest little things, and my friends that are my marine biologists, Nicole Crane and her husband is also a marine biologist at UC Santa Cruz. They've said that they can't train students to have that. Like if you grow up in nature, then you have this like strange ability to spot something. And I don't even know if it's probably just energetic, but it's a beautiful gift that I love so much. And it's really connected me. And really, it started my journey because when I figured out that all the sunscreens were that crappy, I was like, oh, wow, this is so bad for the earth. And so I started making all the products I made were good for the earth. If we don't make something that's better, we don't do it. And so sunscreen at the time was like this toothpastey, nasty stuff. And so we started to there because the competitors were so bad. And if you had slightly darker skin or a little bit of a tan, you would just look like a terrible ghost. And so it wasn't socially acceptable. So I think the hardest and most interesting part of the reef safe sunscreen movement has been the social acceptability of a product like zinc oxide, which is the one we like because it's safest. And so it's safest for children. It doesn't even soak through the dermal layer of the skin at all. And so those things, having a baby with an allergy definitely led me on this journey. I don't know if I was in the corporate world and had a baby and went, oh my gosh, like this is just, I don't want to spend my time doing something that's not important anymore. and it felt like I was just wasting my time. And so Goddess Garden for me has been entirely a journey of making products. And honestly, we've kind of run it like a nonprofit. In the Hawaii campaign, we gave out over 500,000 samples. So, so my company, like, we did not make a profit, we'll just say. We gave out so many samples. But these products that we sell now, we actually put a Reef Safe sticker on them, which is a bit controversial, and it shouldn't be. It's like the brands that aren't doing the right things are making it controversial, but it should not be. It means that we buy a more expensive zinc oxide that's guaranteed to be reef safe and not too micronized. So there's a happy medium there. So it's good for humans, good for fish, and right in the middle. But definitely, yeah, growing up in the Canadian wilderness changed my journey. The other thing that changed my journey is that after I got married, my partner and I took a trip in our van through Baja, and I fell in love with the ocean. And I was in my 20s, and I think that really inspired me, especially after Hawaii already banned 2 of the chemical sunscreens. And so that kind of led the way, I thought, for California to follow. So that's where I would like to press California, because about 40% of our coastline is actually a marine sanctuary. It started off when I asked the first NOAA guy, it was in the 62%. There's actually a jurisdiction that says that water coming down into the sanctuary needs to be clean, and it can't have any chemicals that are going to be detrimental to the sanctuary. So the 2 chemicals that are at the top of the list in hormone disruptors, out of only like 13 approved altogether sunscreen ingredients, two of them, oxybenzone, is the nastiest. And then the other one was octinoxate that we also lobbied against in Hawaii, but really it's a spectrum of hormone disruption. And so it's such an interesting place, because I think it's kind of like, it reminds me of, have you guys ever heard about the social movement spotted owl up in the Pacific Northwest woods? And it was endangered. And so anytime we could find one, we could save those woods. so there was these environmentalists out like hunting for these spotted owls. And that's what the coral reef kind of reminds me of. It reminds me of, this is just a little sign that things aren't quite right, but really the coral reef is like the center of our ecosystem. And so the tiny little coral is just one example of something that's having trouble with hormone replicate, like its hormones are being disrupted, which is the exact same thing that the chemical sunscreens do to humans too. It disrupts our hormones, and our body can't tell if it's estrogen or not, so it turns things off and on, which is really detrimental to women, and really all of us humans. But anyway, I'm kind of off on a super tangent. But what I was trying to say was that this tiny coral reef is kind of like an example of a larger issue, that we're not paying attention to what's going into our water. And so when I look at the water opportunities around the Monterey Bay, I look at us being able to keep a lot of things out of our water that we really should be able to, like the Salinas Valley is draining all those pesticides and herbicides. That shouldn't be okay into the Monterey Bay. We would love to turn all of that farmland into organic farmland eventually, and make sure that none of those, because they create the red tides. So, which is toxic to the fish. And so what's happening at the coral reef is like a microscopic level, and it's all about those green algae. Green algae in the ocean, the good algae, produces more than half of the oxygen on our planet. And so that's when I became really focused on this issue, because I was like, oh wow, so the ocean's like the lungs of the planet, and if more oxygen, like 62%, I think, was the recent statistic that I saw of oxygen that's coming from the ocean, then it's so important that we protect that area.
In this next section, Nova talks about the chemicals and the climate that causes coral bleaching in our oceans.
But the little zooxanthellae are the teeny little microorganisms that are the beautiful colors, and they can't reproduce anymore. And we know for sure that it's mainly that, like, it's most affected by chemicals. Yes, there's a climate component, which is my biggest concern with ocean waters, but we know for sure that it's big time affecting it. So
Not only is global warming causing glaciers to melt and oceans to rise, but there is also the risk of drastic changes in marine biodiversity. It is estimated that if the warming is not decreased to under 2 degrees Celsius by the year 2100, there will be changes up to 70% in marine biodiversity. However, if we lower it to under 1 degree Celsius, then there could be an increase in about 16% in marine biodiversity. If the warming is at 3.7, then we could see the largest change in biodiversity in the last 3 million years. And that's according to warming threat to ocean biodiversity. The warming of the ocean is causing coral reefs to die, which means they are not able to be used for food and protection like when they are healthy. According to worldwildlife.org, coral reefs are expected to completely die out by 2050.
At this point of the interview, Nova explains how relevant this issue is to the Monterey Peninsula.
Even in Monterey Bay, people are like, "Oh, we don't have coral reefs," and the head of NOAA is like, "We have 400-year-old coral reefs that are endangered. Like it's like a 400-year-old growth, like old growth forest."
Yeah.
So those places like on Mount Davidson are really worth so much and so valuable. We have no idea that we should definitely be protecting them. So just because we can't see them like we can in Hawaii doesn't mean they're not there.
About 80 miles from the coast of Monterey, there is an inactive volcano which is called the Davidson Seamount. Here, a little over 4,000 feet below sea level, there is a large amount of ancient and colorful coral. From a quote from the Monterey Bay Aquarium Research Institute, coral reefs are charismatic and deep water corals are even more surprising. When you're in the deep, dark sea, you don't expect to see brilliant pink bubblegum corals as large as oak trees or bright yellow Picasso sea sponges, says Jim Berry, senior scientist with the Monterey Bay Aquarium Research Institute. There is a lot that we still do not know about coral. Some thrive in shallow waters, but others can live in deep, cold environments. Now that we have a more in-depth understanding of coral reef safe sunscreen and the damages that chemical sunscreens can cause to our coral reefs, Nova explains that this is an issue that is relevant to pretty much everyone.
And what I was going to say about the showering part is that's such an educational experience, because if the water is coming all the way from the east side of the Rockies and going into the Gulf of Mexico, it's been polluted since it was up in Colorado when everyone was showering off their chemical sunscreens.
Wow.
And that's just one of the little things. So if we can ban them, even in California, they'll have to ban them across the country, because no companies will be able to sell. The biggest majority of their sunscreen is sold in California, so they would have to change their product. So that's my goal, is to make sure that we follow Hawaii, because it would change. If California can follow Hawaii, it'll change our entire trajectory. And then the chemical sunscreens will have to reformulate. But the reality is we should be looking at our water in so much more of a holistic function, because this is a super cool thing. It's this perfect little water molecule, and the chemicals we're putting in are oil products, they're petroleum products, and so they're separating from the water, and that's what's creating those weird slicks. I don't know if you guys have noticed, you're at the beach and you can kind of see the weird rainbow slick on top of the water.
Yeah.
Those are the chemicals, and they separate from the water, so they're not even mingling. It's just messing up our water molecule. Gross. But we have so much of them. It's like, yay, more petroleum products. It's always the base of everything, right? Unless you use something plant-based, and so that's kind of where everything's headed, is plant-based and vegan. So we don't have to use those bases anymore. Because without those, that's kind of what's been the base of all of the lotions for the last 50 years have been petroleum products.
After educating us on so much about coral reefs, Nova closes with this inspiring statement.
And we will fix it because we're smart humans and we've done so many miraculous things. We've been to the moon. I'm sure we can figure this out. But we do have to get serious. And so we're going to need people like you guys who can talk about these issues and speak to them really clearly.
And on that note, we conclude our podcast on coral reefs and reef safe sunscreen. We appreciate you guys so much for listening, and we hope that you guys may have been able to learn something new today with our interview with Nova Covington. If you would like more information on Goddess Garden Organics, you could go to their website on goddessgarden.com. So thank you guys so much for listening, and have a good rest of your day.